Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harris and I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books. And in a very slight departure from what I said the schedule was going to be this week, we are going to be covering a video that I completely forgot I had to make, which is Q3 in review. So as a YouTuber, I feel like it's kind of important and interesting to talk about the year, not just in like weekly and monthly increments, but also quarterly. This gives a chance for people who have not been watching the channel for a long time, or who are not able to keep up with the channel on the weekly, monthly update recap basis, to keep in touch with what I've been reading, what I've been loving, and maybe find some new stuff to read or some links to reviews that they might want to watch. So let's talk about it. This quarter, I have read 18 books, which is pretty cool. Now, that is an average across the 3 months of 6 books a month. 3 6s are 18, aren't they? Yeah, okay. So 3 6s are 18. Sorry, the cat's now scratching to get out. Okay, he'll come up at his leisure. So I've read 18 books. 10 of those were fantasy, 8 of those were sci-fi. So normally I do try to keep one of each, like one then the other. But this quarter, a couple of times I think I read some back-to-back fantasy. This quarter I read 3 urban fantasy books, kind of out of the cadence because I read them in September while I was reading other stuff because the other stuff didn't have audiobooks. We'll talk about it. So now, of those 18 books, let's break it down. So 10, not 10, as I said, 10 of those were fantasy, 8 of them were sci-fi. However, 14 were novels. So I feel like that's pretty good for a new dad, because my daughter was born at the very end of June. I say new dad, I've been a dad for almost 5 years, but I'm now a 2 times dad when my daughter was born. And many people who have children will tell you that when you have a newborn, you have a lot less free time. And that has been the case. So I've had a lot less time for reading. And I think the other thing that has been a really big change for me is that I've had less focus and energy for reading. So I often will still have a few hours in the evening, which was where I did primarily all of my reading before. But now, those few hours in the evening, I've only really got an hour where I'm still lucid and awake enough to enjoy reading. And a couple of times I've pushed further and read later. And all of those times I've pretty much regretted it because I've been like, oh, I need to reread that section. That's happened to me a couple of times with the book that I'm reading at the moment, which is Return to Adan, which I'm so close to finishing right now. I'm like 20% left. And I'm going to try and finish it today, but I'm not also going to push myself into that too tired to read and enjoy it phase. And that's been a big change for me because I used to read quite late into the evenings. So I would get my son in bed between 7 and 8, and then at like 8 o'clock I would have finished all the house jobs and I would sit down to read. And I would sit down to read from usually 8 o'clock until about 10:30, sometimes 11 o'clock. And then at 10:30 or 11, I would wind down for the evening, basically, to like turn my brain off with a video game or something. Or just get straight into bed if I'm tired. Whereas now, I tend to be staying up a bit later to claim back that time from new child. And then it ends up that I'm actually more tired the next day, less able to read. It all kind of snowballs. But I'm still enjoying my reading. Still have no intention to slow down any more than I have. So I read 14 novels, which again feels pretty good, especially because a lot of those novels, like 2 of them were Wheel of Time books that were massive. That's pretty cool. And I read 3 novellas. I read all 3 of those for Self-Pub September because I wanted to do, because like novellas are actually a really big part of Self-Pub. Lots of authors write novellas for their Self-Pub series, and what I thought was I'm going to do like a novella week. So the original plan was to read 4 novellas and then post a review every day. And when I asked for feedback on that, a lot of viewers said, just post them in the same video and timestamp them. And that's what I did. So that is up live on the channel if you want to see the reviews for all of those novellas. So we ended up not having novella week, we had novella day. However, I enjoyed reading all 3 novellas and I would recommend all 3 to you. So I also read 1 short story anthology, which was Tales of the Sunny Volume 2. That has me lined up now to read Kingdoms of Death. And the exciting part about that is that when you read Kingdoms of Death, there is nothing between Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man because they were intended originally to be a single volume. So if you read Kingdoms of Death, there's not like with the other books, you read like a really high quality book and then you have to go into like a short story anthology, or for example, Queen Amid Ashes was quite middling as a novella, and it's like you go from the highs of Demon in White to the lows of Queen Amid Ashes. Although I don't know, was Queen Amid Ashes before Demon in White? I'm not sure. Anyway, so you end up with like taking that trip, and it isn't great. I don't think Rocchio's novellas, aside from The Lesser Devil, have been as good. There's a great Crispin story in Tales of the Sunny Volume 2, which I really rated because I'm a huge Crispin fan, and looking forward to seeing where the series goes. I thought that I was going to pick up Kingdoms of Death at some point at the end of the year, and then I realised that there's only 2 months left because it's already October, and one of the months that I have left is going to be completely given over to reading what my subscribers recommend, so which will be picked at random. So I guess I'm actually probably not going to read Kingdoms of Death this year, but the final Sunnyter book will be released at the end of 2025, so I think my current plan is probably just read like a Sunnyter book per quarter, and then make sure that also inside that quarter I'm reading short stories, novellas, etc. that I need to read in order to catch up to the final book when it releases. And in an ideal world, I will read that final book like the day it launches. So that'll be exciting. Maybe I'll even get an early review copy. I've got an early review copy of a really hyped book that is coming out later this year. So don't want to say what it is, but I'm excited to read it. And let's talk about some individual kind of top hits, hot takes, as it were. So I would like to give you guys my favourite book, my biggest surprise, and my biggest disappointment. So that's going to be my favourite book is just going to be the book that kind of excelled and worked the best for me across that time. Biggest surprise is going to be, it could be positive or negative. So it could be a book that I was expecting to love and hated, or it could be a book I was expecting to hate and loved. And in this case, it isn't really either of those things, but I'll talk to you about it when I get to it. And then also my biggest disappointment is mostly going to be measured against my expectations. So if I was expecting a 5-star and I got a 3, that could be a lot more disappointing to me than if I'm expecting a 3-star and I get a 2. Does that make sense? So I used to have a least favourite book or worst book as part of these wrap-ups, and I've decided to remove that because I honestly don't want that negative energy. I feel like disappointment is even more negative than I really want, but I think that it's important to highlight the gap between expectations and reality for some stuff. So let's talk about my favourite book. And I looked across the months on Goodreads, I was looking through and I was trying to decide what was the book that I kind of came away with the most joy out of. And I have to say, I think that I've landed on Infinity Gate by M.R. Carey. So this is a multiverse story done right. You've seen a lot of multiverse stories in popular media lately where the multiverse is just kind of an excuse to trot out some old actors in old costumes, not pointing fingers at anyone. And I will say, I do like those stories. However, I am looking for a bit more from multiverse personally, and I really liked the way that M.R. Carey does it. This is a story that kind of starts out in Lagos in Nigeria and expands across the possibilities of an infinite universe. It's a really, really interesting story. I really had a lot of fun with the characters, and I haven't read the sequel yet, and I don't know why. Well, I do know why. It's because I'm really bad at reading sequels, but I will be reading that at some point. It also wasn't available in my library last time I checked, so that could be why. It's only a duology as well, so when I've read Echo of Worlds, I have finished the series. So if you're interested, I did a full review of Infinity Gate, and I really loved it. And looking back on it, it's the one that stuck with me the most across all the books that I read. Aside from maybe Wheel of Time stuff, it's hard for me to separate the Wheel of Time books out into specific books now. And while Lord of Chaos might end up being my number one, number two of all the books that I've read in the Wheel of Time so far, basically, since The Shadow Rising, they've been a lot more episodic, and due to that episodic nature, it's been harder to call out one specifically as a favourite, if that makes sense. Also, is it a bit unfair to just constantly say, my favourite was The Wheel of Time, my favourite was The Wheel of Time? And I want to try and highlight some more stuff for you guys. I will tell you now, basically every Wheel of Time book since The Great Hunt has been a 5 out of 5 for me, and Infinity Gate was also a 5 out of 5. So, see you, mate. My biggest surprise is Return to Adan. So, I had heard that this book was experimental and interesting and different to what people were expecting, but now I'm close to the end of this book, and I kind of don't want it to end. I've been reading it pretty slowly, and it's mad how interesting this book is. In a review for this book, I would talk about the way that the second book wraps up. The way that the second book wrapping up is quite different to most fantasy trilogies. And then I would talk about the concept and execution of this book. I can't really do that here because you might not have read book 1, you might not have read book 2, so I don't really want to go into depths of what's going on. However, I think that this book deals pretty directly with the nature of religion, of messianic figures. It also pulls us out of the kind of point of view of the traditional protagonist of this series and into the people around them. It gives us this new and interesting view on different sides of the conflict that the books kind of center around. And I think it also really, it's really interesting to be reading, and I said this before, like, I liked in John Gwynn's Bloodsworn series how we get I want to say villain POV. It's not really a villain POV, but we get POVs from both sides of the conflict in that, and we get that again here. Return to Adan for me has been a genuine surprise. I got goosebumps when I read the first chapter, like literal, like my arm was raising up in goosebumps, and it's only continued at that peak level of quality. And I would be shocked if when I finish Return to Adan, it is not very, very, very high up in my best books of the year list, and maybe my best books of all time list. Biggest disappointment. So the biggest disappointment is a weird one because it is a massively popular book. It's been turned into a film, and it's The Martian by Andy Weir. So when you read The Martian, it's an epistolary novel. It was published on a, what's the term? Serialized. It was serialized on Andy Weir's website because no one would publish it. And I'm not surprised that no one would publish it, having read it. It is a good story, and it is written in a decent manner. It's decently well written, technically. But the big problem for me is that nothing happens on the page. Because it's epistolary, everything happens in the past. So, and the narrator for the majority of it is the main character. So there's no threat to him because everything dangerous or thrilling that has happened, he's describing after the fact. It really doesn't work well for me. There's no tension in the series. There's no there's no real tension in the book. I never was like, oh, he's not going to make it, because you know he's made it because he's already writing the diary entries about it. I really enjoyed the chapters that were in the present tense from the crew at NASA and the crew on the ship. But the actual bits about the Martian, the Mark Watney chapters and the diary entries, log entries, that sort of thing, I thought were not as interesting, and they are the bulk of the book. So while I didn't have a bad experience with this book, it was probably the biggest distance between expectations and enjoyment of all of them. And having read Artemis afterwards, which was heavily criticised and what's the term, denigrated in kind of comparison to The Martian, I just don't understand that, because I loved Artemis. I had a really good time with it. And I feel like it fixes all the problems of The Martian. The fact that we have more characters, the fact that things are kind of happening more in media res, but it got much, much worse reception, which I don't really understand. However, it could just be different strokes for different folks, and I'm one of those different folks. That's the books. Let's talk a little bit about the channel. I don't want to keep you guys here for too long today because I have made a lot of long videos recently, but I would also like to talk a little bit about the channel because we have had some really cool stuff happening in the last 3 months. So views, we have had 22,000 views over the last 3 months, roughly, which is kind of insane. 22,000 people have watched a second of one of my videos. Well, my videos have been watched 22,000 times, not 22,000 individual people. We have had 1,877 watch hours, which is also pretty mad. I wonder if I went back and looked at the first quarter on the channel ever, so like the August and September of 2023, what that would be at. I wonder if it would be like 10. And we have gained, weirdly, so most months I get about 80 subs, right? It's been pretty poor recently, weirdly, in end of September and early October, but we did have a couple of spikes through the summer where I was on a couple of other people's channels, and a couple of authors shared my videos, and I got some new subscribers in there. And so we have had 331 subscribers join the community over the last 3 months. Every single one of you that has subscribed, genuinely, I'm so grateful. And the reason I'm even more grateful on this occasion is because that we finally hit 1,000 subscribers. So we're over the hump. We are now monetized, And if I take you guys to the money zone for a second, I can tell you that in the last 3 months, I have earned £11.70 from YouTube AdSense, which is really cool. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who has subscribed, everybody that's liked, everybody that's commented, everyone that's shared. I genuinely, massively appreciate any interaction, any time you give me and my content. And I hope that you're getting the value from the content that I'm trying to provide. If there's anything that you want from the channel that you'd like to see, so if there's series of books that you'd like to see me read, if there's more, if I've made some videos in the past that you love that you'd like me to make more of, anything that you're interested in, drop down in the comments below and let me know what you want. This channel is as much for you guys as it is for me, and I would really like to make sure that the right kind of stuff is coming out. If you have liked watching this video, please do give it a like. If you'd like to promote the channel to your friends, this might be a great place to start, because this is kind of giving you a kind of a capsule of my views on a bunch of different books. If you haven't subscribed, please do, as it would be lovely to have you as part of the community. Thanks so much for watching, and I will speak to you tomorrow.